Welcome back to my workshop and welcome back to my garage. In today's video, we're going to be starting the finishing process on the Pango Les Paul kits that we've been working on. This is a sponsored video by Pango Music. They were nice enough to send me the kits so I could build them and do the reviews on them, so thank you very much for that. So if you're interested in buying a kit, please, there's an affiliate link down below that you can use. This will allow you to get a discount on the kit when you order it, and it does kick a little bit of money back to me. So thank you for any support that you might be able to give to me and to the channel. In preparation for this video, I went ahead and sanded the bodies and the necks down to 220 front and back. I didn't think that you guys needed on the video to see me sanding for an hour and a half or 2 hours. This one's the quilt maple top, and this one has the flame maple top. For the sanding process on these, I started with 120, went up to 180, and then finally with 220. After I sanded them to 220, I wetted the bodies down and the necks down to let that wood fiber back up. And after it dried, I went ahead and hit it again with 220. So now the guitars are ready to start the finishing process. What I'm going to be doing with these, I'm going to be dyeing the tops, and I may dye the backs. I'm not sure on the backs yet, but I'm probably going to paint them a solid color. But before we do any of that, what we need to do is grain fill. We don't need to grain fill the maple tops. And the reason for that is you want the stain to soak into the softer parts of the maple. That way it gives that depth and everything. But the mahogany on the back, we do want to grain fill. We want to make sure that we get it a nice smooth surface. The product that I'm going to be using is a water-based filler from StewMac. This is a water-based grain filler. I'm going to put it on using a squeegee. This is a soft rubber squeegee. So the scraper will let me press it down into the pores of the wood without taking the chance of leaving marks in the wood from a harder type scraper. So let's go ahead and start the grain filling process. I'm not going to sit through the whole thing on this with you. Just going to kind of show you the basics on what I'm doing so you get a general idea of it. And then I'll just finish the rest off camera. So we're going to be starting with this one first. Surprisingly, this is actually a veneer on the back of this. And there were a couple places when I was doing the sanding that it was starting to come loose a little bit. The glue had failed, or it just wasn't glued down properly. So what I did is I just went ahead and sanded that back. I got a nice feathered in surface with it. As the backs are going to be painted, it doesn't really matter. That won't be seen. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take this grain filler, and as you can see, it's just kind of a clear paste. Just going to take a little bit out. You can see what I've got there. Set it on my scraper. Get this down on the wood. See, I'm going cross grain to the wood, and that's what you want to do after you get it on there, is because that's going to press it down into the pores. So you can see this goes a long way. So you just want to work this down in, but you can see how this scraper is nice and soft, so it doesn't take the chance of leaving marks in the wood. Because this is a water-based filler, it will shrink a little bit when it dries. So what we'll do is once this dries, and I'm going to give it a good 24 hours to dry. That way if there's any deeper stuff down in the pores and it'll take a little bit longer for that to dry, I don't take the chance of pulling that grain fill back out of the grain because it was still wet. So after this has had a good 24 hours to dry, I'll take and I'll sand it back, and if I need to put another coat on, I can put another coat on at that time. Usually on a heavy porous wood like mahogany, 2 coats will probably be the norm. So as you can see, that little bit of grain fill that I put on there went a long way. Now the neck can be a little bit different because you do have a round shape, so really the scraper isn't going to work very well on that. But what you can do, and I've done this, you can use a brush, you can use the scraper, but the thing that I found is the easiest is I kind of push it in with my hand. And you can see here what I'm doing is I'm kind of rubbing it in, and I'm leaving it kind of thick at the moment, and I can move it around, and that way I can massage it in underneath and get it into the pores, especially in this area here on the neck heel, because there is a lot of end grain with that. Now what you can see is I can just take and with my scraper get any of the excess off. I can come this way as well. What do you do for the edge? I'll show you how I work on the edge. Because it is a flat surface and you have the scraper, it does make it pretty easy. You will use a little bit more here because you will end up in some end grain situations. But those usually take a little bit more to fill. So when you're doing the grain fill on it, pay attention to those areas. Make sure that you're getting them filled properly. Avoid putting a whole bunch of filler on there because, like I said, it does take longer to dry. But also, the more filler you put on there, only the stuff down in the pores you want to leave. Everything else you've got to kind of sand off. So you don't want to put a bunch on there if you can avoid it. But I'm going to go ahead and continue this off camera. It's a pretty boring process. Basically, I'm just applying it to the guitar. Whatever method works best for you. Like I said, on the neck, sometimes I'll use a brush, but a lot of times I'll just use my finger and rub it in, and that'll be good. So we'll bring you back after these have dried before we do this first sanding. I finished the sanding after the initial grain fill. Everything came out really well. A little bit right in this area on both guitars will need to be a little bit more grain fill because we're getting into some end grain here, right in this area. This area here needs a little bit more, and then right around the heel of the neck just needs a little bit more grain fill in those areas on both guitars. So I'm going to go ahead and put some more grain fill in those, let those dry for 24 hours, come back and hit it again with the second sanding. When I sand it again, I will go ahead and hit 220 on the whole guitar and get that sanded, and then I will probably hit 320 just for a final sand on both guitars. Again, super easy on this because it is only the waist area that needs a little bit of grain fill. I clean these up with naphtha after I finish sanding. That way I got a good clean surface, and I blew all the extra wood dust out of the pores that were still there. If I was going to do an oil finish on these, I wouldn't worry about the grain as much, because a lot of times when I do the oil finish, I go in with sandpaper and kind of sand it in, wet sand that in there, and that builds kind of a slurry with the dust coming off the sanding, and it actually helps to fill the voids there. All right, so I finished the second layer of grain fill, or the second coat of grain fill, and I've sanded these back now to 320. The tops, the backs, and the sides, and the neck, and everything sanded to 320. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to use some naphtha, and I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. This will also give you an idea what these tops are going to look like. By wetting the top, it's going to make that grain pop out, and you get a better look at what the figuring is going to be like on this veneer. So this is the quilt, and as you can see, that quilt really comes out. Looks really, really nice. And then this one's the flame maple. You don't want to go much more than 320 on the tops if you're going to dye them, because that'll start to actually burnish the wood and it'll prevent the dye from sinking in. So that gives you a good idea right there on what these tops are going to look like. I'm going to do this one in a red, and then I'm going to feather black at the edges. The flame maple, I'm going to go with kind of like an anaconda burst, so a green burst on this with black around the edges. And then the back of the guitar again will be painted black. So as you can see, what I've done is I've got the binding masked off to try and eliminate as much of the dye getting on the binding as possible. There'll be a little bit, it's gonna seep under a little bit because a couple of these places aren't staying down very well. So I will have to do a little bit of scraping. So what I've done is, you can see I've masked off the binding on the front, the fretboard, and the binding on the headstock. This one is going to get the red with the black, and then I'm going to try doing an oxblood on the back. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to apply the red. If you want a real expert for doing dyes, look for Big D Guitars on YouTube. He does fantastic dye jobs. What I'm going to be using is Angelus Leather Dyes. This is a water-based dye, and you'll see how far this goes. Just this little bit here on the rag. And you can see that really makes that quilt pop out. You can really see it. The one thing you have to be careful of with veneers, or be aware of when you're doing it with veneers, is if the glue soaks through the veneer and you get a glue spot on the veneer, the dye won't penetrate it like it should. And you can see a little bit on the edge. Especially on this one, you can see a little bit where the glue kind of spilled over on the veneer or seeped through the veneer a little bit. But you can see that really made that quilt pop. And it'll be even better once it gets a clear coat on it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some black, and I'm just going to brush a little bit right along the edges. Now that we've got the black in there, What we're going to do now is come back in with some more red. This red will kind of activate the black, and it will start to draw it together and feather it in. See how when we're working it in, it kind of makes that black, it makes that hard line disappear. I think that's gonna look good. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to live with these spots here. I just can't get through the veneer at that point. I don't want to take the chance of sanding through. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the ox blood. So I'm going to continue on with this, and I'll bring you back when I'm done. So with this one, I'm going to go with the 3-tone, actually. I'm going to start off with gold. I'm going to do the whole top in gold, and then I'm going to brush in some turquoise, then I'll hit it with some Kelly green. So let's get the gold on first, and that's going to be mainly in the middle. There's the gold. Now we're going to add some turquoise. Now I'm going to hit the rest of it with green and then blend that all together. And this is kind of giving me that anaconda burst that I was looking for, especially as these colors come together. There we go. That looks pretty good. After we feather in this black, then I'm going to wash it all back with more green. All right, now that I've got the black in there, I'm gonna go ahead and hit it with some more green. Actually, I'm gonna hit it with some turquoise. I think that's gonna blend it in nice. I'm gonna hit the body with green because I've already got the turquoise in it. But I'm gonna hit the neck and everything and the back with turquoise. A little bit more on this to fill it in to where it's not as blotchy. But yeah, nice back and sides will do. I think the black looks better. It was getting a little blotchy with the other one. This is going to give it just a tint of green. A couple glue spots on it, but the headstock as well kind of did it to match. The back continues with that. It's not a solid black. The neck is a little bit more solid color, which is fine. The same with the bottom, kind of gives that mottled look in there as well. So this I'm going to hang up to dry, let it dry for 24 hours, the same as the other one. And then once that's done, I'll hit it with some steel wool to knock off the top of the dye, and that'll make the color pop a little bit more. Then I'll hit it with some sanding sealer before I do the clear coats. All I'm using is some double-aught steel wool. So let's go ahead and hit the top of this guitar and you can see it. You can see what it's going to do. And when you're doing this, the way you can tell that you've got it to about as good as you're going to get it with the steel wool, when you first start to do it, you're going to feel a little bit of resistance. It's going to be a little bit of tug at that steel wool where it's pulling that dye back up. But once you feel that smooth slide over the top of the wood, that's when you know that you've got it as good as you're going to get it with the steel wool. Okay, here's the red one. Steel wool back. And now for the green one. So I had to change of plan. I decided to go ahead and just clean all the binding on this and let the binding pop. Basically, I've just got a scraping tool from Stumac, and you set the depth and how much you want it to, and that way you can just come along the edge of the binding and you just run around the edge of the binding. This tool works really well for that. I made the same decision on the green guitar to go ahead and scrape the binding. I am going to change this one a little bit. I'm actually going to paint the back of it black. That way it'll give us more solid color and it'll complement the front a little bit better. Now it's time to hit it with some sanding sealer. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to mask off the fretboard because I don't want any sanding sealer on the fretboard. But then I'm going to hit the rest of the guitar in sanding sealer. The sanding sealer that I'm going to use is just Mohawk pre-catalyzed sanding sealer. I'm going to spray the whole guitar, probably about 2 to 3 coats. What that's going to do is it's going to lock in the dye. Then I can sand that smooth with some 600 grit sandpaper just to sand any roughness off of it, and then I'm going to hit it with the clear coat. I don't want to spray around my camera, so I'm going to go ahead and spray this off camera and then bring it back. So that's about all we have time for in this video, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. In the next video, we'll be going over the rest of the finishing process on the guitars. Please, if you like what I'm doing, click like, click subscribe. If you have any comments, please leave them below. I do try and answer every comment that I get. So until next time, thank you for stopping by the channel, and take care.